Funny because Francisco is such a fashionista. I know his angle on this whole jet thing. He is already probably going to start designing the interiors of the jets. And Philly, by next year, we're going to have an Art Rocks jet designed by Francisco.
Well, without further ado, we must introduce our new fashion correspondent. He's been on the show once before, kind of like a practice run.
Yes.
But Francisco Medavog is a extraordinary gentleman. Francisco, welcome once again. We're so happy to have you back in the studio.
Thanks for having me on the show.
And Francisco is an artist himself. He's got such an amazing story. In fact, I've got this big, fat scrapbook sitting in front of me that he handed to me in the green room, in between drinks of the show Cabernet.
Which is amazing, that wine.
It is.
I already had a half bottle.
He's all warmed up.
And Francisco is a gentleman, I mean, just leafing through the scrapbook and through his websites, which are, what are your websites?
www.medavog.net, which is MEDAV as in vodka OG.net, and medavog.com. They're separate. Medavog.net is about all my fashion photography and art, and Medavog.com is about my couture collection and my fashion designing through the years.
He is like a Renaissance man, I'll tell you. There is no stone in art or fashion this gentleman has left untouched. I mean, fashion photography, artists, fashion designing, fashion collecting. I mean, this guy's done it all. And he's done it all with style and grace and fun. And
it's all about having fun.
I agree. Don't you, Philly?
And energy, and just going through the scrapbook and the website. I mean, there are pictures of Francisco with Paris Hilton, with Zonda Rhodes, Carmen Electra,
amongst others.
I mean, this guy is on the fashion scene and
dressing all the beautiful women. And you know what I happen to really like about his particular style is he has an amazing vintage couture collection.
Yes, it dates back to vintage, basically, it's 100 years, and then it becomes antique. But nowadays, people think that it's because it's from the 80s, that it's vintage. It is not vintage, it's just old. But the new generation, they don't understand that back in 1991, people did not wear vintage, period.
Right.
You were not seen wearing vintage, even at the Oscars.
It wasn't cool and hip.
It wasn't cool and hip. It's just a new thing, and it's like art. People love, how people collect art and invest art?
Yes.
Our new generations of people are collecting other things that are not paintings. They're collecting designers that have long been passed, gone, and the only art that they could basically give to the world was fashion. And this is what I do. I collect vintage fashion dating back to the turn of the 1800s, and basically I stop in 1989.
Okay, so that's your cutoff point.
Yes.
This sounds like my closet.
Except Mr. Medavog has 5 storage units filled with vintage couture.
Okay, well, my closet's not that big.
Yeah, and he's also had museum shows with his vintage. Tell us a little bit about those shows.
Basically, I've started collecting designer clothes only because my mother said, before you start school, because I went to the Fashion Institute, I studied 2 years in fashion. She said, if you want to be a really good designer, I want to go somewhere where there's having like a sale, like an estate sale. I want to look for clothes that have been made in Paris that are old. So, of course, in 1988, you would find things from the 60s because the 70s was tacky. It was just, 10 years before.
Yeah, we burned them all, I think.
So the first 3 things that I bought was a Paco Rabanne suit, a Pierre Cardin, and a Christian Dior from the 60s. And through looking at those clothes, when I was in school studying for fashion designing for 2 years, I was the best sketcher, the best sewer. I was the most creative. Actually, the teachers stopped me at every assignment and said, you know what, you have to do things that people can wear. I said, well, this is not what I want to do. I want to create things that I don't want to make things that people are wearing all the time. I want to make knowledge that I've had when I started designing clothes I basically studied the entire history of fashion. And the entire history of fashion is not just Christian Dior and Chanel. I mean, it's very underground. You have to learn about designers that only were alive for like 3 years, and so basically that's what I did. And when I would go to estate sales, yard sales, or I would go and private sales, whatever, I would always find like Pucci gowns, Gernrich, Stephen Burrows, Gus van
And
den
you know what's
Acker.
so funny, Philly, is he still gets excited when he finds vintage clothes.
Designer that you can possibly think of, and underground designers. I have a lot of museums coming to San Francisco. Please donate some of your clothes.
And you know what? Isn't it your dream to have a fashion museum right here in San Diego?
I would love to have a museum in San Diego, but it takes time. And when I started collecting designer clothes, I only did it for me to learn how things were constructed. One bag turned into an 18-gallon box, to 1,000 garments, to 10,000 garments. To
Francisco, I'm so fascinated by what you've been doing, and you know, in the modern world today, people don't pay too much attention to standards. But there are standards in the art world. I don't care how far out your art is, or how radical it is, or how fringe it is. It always has to be measured against the fountain of all art, which is Western civilization, the birth of Western civilization in ancient Greece. And if you can't make a connection with that, you haven't made a connection.
You're out of bounds.
It's not. And that's what I love about your approach.
There's always etiquette. There's always a certain etiquette that you have to go through. And if you want to be a successful designer or a successful artist or a successful stylist, you always have to follow the rule. Because there's a lot of people who are looking for, to hire artists or because they just want to be part of our world. But there's an etiquette. You just don't do
there's
things
a protocol.
Over the top.
Exactly.
There's a harmony. There's a rhythm. There's
always
a
has to be an elegance about it.
Yes.
Because if it's not elegant, then it's tacky. And if it's tacky, then you're not in.
And we can never have tacky.
When you're in, maybe one day you're in, but the next day you're out.
That's right.
The classic influence, of course, is that it all begins with the human body.
Yes.
And if it doesn't make the human body, if it doesn't celebrate the human body,
yes.
The form of it, yes.
The form, the essence, the being, it's something that degrades the human body. You're either celebrating the human body and the human form, the human spirit, or you're degrading it. And I love your approach. You've got this unbelievable collection that is beginning. I know that you're going to have a museum of fashion.
Thank you.
I know that it's going to become a reference point for the whole world. They're all going to come to San Diego because that's where we're going to establish it. We're announcing the establishment of the Francisco Fashion Museum right here, right now on Art Rocks. And your donations are gladly accepted,
And he also has you can also see your artwork in a local
gallery.
boutique.
We got about 1 minute left, folks.
It's 2205 Fern Street. I have 40 images on display, Magpie Gallery. And, of course, you can go to my website,
www.medavog.net,
and you can look through all that. But I just want to say one final thing. Reading through books and books of history, all for the past 20 years, I've read the entire history of fashion designers and how it started. And it's funny how fashion basically started because people wore fashion to protect themselves from the seasons. And it's funny how now we have to have clothes for 4 seasons.
Exactly.
And it shows you how far we have gone. And that is basically I always know my past and I always rebuild my future, and that's always my motto.
All right.